Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. There's nothing quite like taking a nap under a handmade quilt. Quilts are magical. They warm you up when you're a little cold. And a quilt made with a grandmother's love? You can't beat that. But textile art goes beyond the wonders of quilt making. There's also clothing, rug making, and fiber art, to name a few. This kind of work tells stories about many cultures, about history, and about the person who made it. Later this hour, we'll meet some local textile artists and historians and talk about this legacy and the labor of love. But first, it's time for At Us. Each week, we take and read the comments so you don't have to. Yes, I am encouraging you to literally at us on Twitter at This Is Nashville, on Instagram at This Is Nashville_WPLN, and at WPLN News on Facebook. Joining me now with a look back at the past week is our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Hey, Anna.
Hey, Khalil. I was off last week, and it feels like a lifetime since I've been in the studio.
It's so good to have you back. So this week, we had quite a few comments from our listeners about our episode on Robert Altman's film, Nashville.
Yes, I really enjoyed hearing some of our listeners' memories that they have about the movie. So after Monday's show, we got a really nice email from Amanda, who says that she dated the actor Alan Garfield in the 80s. Alan played Bennett in the movie Nashville, and Amanda said that she remembers that he really enjoyed making the film and working with the large cast. She added, quote, Alan signed on to the film to work with Altman. As a director, he was challenging but brilliant. Frankly, I think the film is a sweet piece and should be treasured as such.
It really is a great film. I highly recommend for any of y'all to go out there and to see it. My favorite part about the comments we got after this show was that so many people have a personal connection to the film somehow. One of our listeners who goes by Jamsky on Twitter shared this. The Altman movie is likely the reason my family visited the city of Nashville when I was young. I must have liked both. I still have the movie and Keith Carradine's album. And I've lived and worked here now for 30 years, but I still haven't been to the Parthenon. Jamsky, you got to hit up the Parthenon. It's great.
Yeah, especially on a nice summer day. But you know what? I really wonder if Altman knew what kind of impact his movie had on the city. But anyways, we got another interesting email this week from a listener named Frank in response to our barbershop episode. He wrote to us to say that he'd heard from a barber in Greenbrier about how some shops in Middle Tennessee were picketed and vandalized by unions in the 1970s.
Oh, wow. Well, we really didn't have time to get into the history of the barbershop scene in Middle Tennessee in our episode Tuesday, but I'm so intrigued by this. Did you look into it?
Yes. And you know what? I fell down a very interesting rabbit hole concerning local history.
Okay.
So just a very short history lesson. So back in the 1950s, union Teamsters targeted non-union barbershops in Nashville and other parts of Tennessee like Knoxville and Chattanooga. Owners were roughed up, windows were smashed, and some shops were severely damaged by sticks of dynamite,
Wow.
which I was like, dang. It actually got to be such a problem that there was a congressional hearing on it in 1957. But the vandalism at the barbershops continued into the 1970s. And you know what? It is a fascinating part of local history.
Talk about not being happy with your shape up. It sounds like that could be a future episode, huh?
Definitely. And you know what? There is a lot more to that story.
All right, Anna. There's one more thing.
Yes.
So I got a voicemail from a listener last week after Friday's show. Our first segment was an election recap, and this particular listener was pretty angry with me.
Ooh, oh no.
Yes. So we were talking about the results of the Democratic race for the gubernatorial nomination. Jason Martin won that nomination. And in the interview, I asked our political reporter, Blaise Gainey, who is Jason Martin?
I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. What was the listener concerned about?
She felt like I sounded dismissive, which totally wasn't my intent.
I mean, it sounded like our listener clearly knew who Dr. James Martin was, Dr. Martin was, but there are actually a lot of voters who may not have an idea of who he is, especially if they did not vote in the Democratic primary. Also, Tennessee is notorious for having a low voter turnout. And one of the reasons why is because there's just a lack of voter education about the candidates and the process and whatnot. So, as a show, we consider it part of our job to inform voters about all the candidates on the ballot.
Totally. And in case you didn't know much about our Democratic nominee for governor, Jason Martin is a first-time candidate for office, but he's long been a critical care doctor in Nashville. We'll definitely talk more about Dr. Martin and other candidates for important races as we get closer to the November election. So, want to give many thanks and a happy return to our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon, for this roundup. Anna, we'll see you soon.
Of course, and our listeners know where to find me online.
Don't forget to add us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and let's keep the comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey to let us know what topics you want us to cover at thisisnashville.org. It is super easy and quick and helps us produce shows with your needs and interests in mind. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll meet some local textile artists and learn about the craft of textiles and how it branches off into different forms of art. Are you a quilter? Do you love textiles? Tweet us at thisisnashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for prep and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. Textile art is beautiful, and it can be so many things: quilts, clothes, rugs, tapestries, and pretty much anything an artist can dream up. What inspires these artists? What stories are they telling us through their work? How can we develop a deeper connection and appreciation for textiles? My next guests can help to answer those questions. I'd like to introduce textile artist and educator Nuveen Barwari, artist Janira Visepo, and fiber artist Rima Day. Welcome to This Is Nashville. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to get a little bit of your origin stories. Nuveen, what medium do you work with and how did you get started?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I have been deconstructing Kurdish dresses that I've collected from the Nashville Kurdish community and turning them into various pieces. You know, I think the special thing about textiles is that they are fluid and they kind of adapt to wherever you put them. You know, you can wear them, you can collage with them, hang them on the wall as like a traditional painting, put them on the floor like a rug, raise them outside. So yeah, I've been, I kind of identify as like a collage artist. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So what was your first piece of work that you were super proud of?
Well, I think my introduction to like fine art probably had to be through like screen printing. My introduction to screen printing was kind of through just a lot of protest happening, and there was something about screen printing that was like super efficient. From one screen, you were able to like print on multiple posters or T-shirts, and so I think from screen printing on T-shirts and posters that led me to like a lot of experimentation on other materials. So yeah, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me, how has your Kurdish heritage, how has that informed your work?
Well, I mean, I think my Kurdish heritage does have a huge role in my practice and research. We have a really rich history of textile art, whether that's Kurdish traditional hand-woven rugs or tapestries, like things like quilts and socks that are made in the homes of many. And then even just like Kurdish dressmaking. So I've been surrounded by textiles my entire life, like many of us, every day when we wake up and decide what to wear. I look at that as a form of collage, putting on a shirt, or which shirt will go over which pants or whatever. But yeah, like Kurdistan definitely, you know, if a brief little history, borders were drawn by the French and British in 1916 through the work of diplomats from the respective countries. The Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 set up the British and French mandates for the region with no regard for the ethnic communities of West Asia, the region we call the Middle East. So the Western diplomats during a time of Western colonialism created national boundaries for much of the Southwest Asian, North African region that we know. Yet, it was not only Western colonialism alone. Kurdistan is akin to a rug that has been cut into 4 different pieces and occupied by Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey. And this occupation and division of Kurdistan has led to genocide, ethnic cleansing, and state-sanctioned violence, which in turn has produced anti-resistance movements. So, often that's the narrative that we always hear, but something that I like to focus on is like the craft that is being produced in these regions, and I think an issue is that we don't often hear about the Kurdish rugs and crafts and stuff is because, they haven't been preserved, so yeah, I think that's something that when I'm using, the materials that I collect from the Kurdish community in Nashville, I think about, the fragmented state of diasporic life, the fragmented state of Kurdistan, and borders, if we look at borders of the rugs and just borders of a painting and etc. Mm-hmm. So these are definitely things that I think about a lot, but also Kurdish music and poetry is something that I grew up listening to a lot. And there's always been a political interpretation as well as a romantic interpretation. A lot of Kurdish poets would use flower motifs and metaphors in their poetry and in their songs, mm-hmm. In fear of the governments occupying their region. So I'm kind of putting a twist on that within the visual arts. And when you first look at my work, it's it looks like a landscape, or it can look very decorative, but also I'm trying, there's that romantic interpretation, but there's also this political interpretation.
Yeah, art as a political statement. Now Janira, mm-hmm. Tell me, how about you? How did you find your artistic voice?
I found my artistic voice just by exploring in my early 20s what I wanted to do just as a human, as a person in this world. I felt like working a 9-to-5 job wasn't really something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to explore with block printing and linoleum block printing specifically. I found it really accessible, and you can buy the supplies at an art store and then just make everything at home. And that's basically how I started experimenting with block printing. After I found just how I loved working with that medium, I started reading books on kilim rugs and pattern textiles, and I kind of took a lot of my inspiration from that, and that's basically how I started.
Well, so what makes your first love, block printing, what makes it so different from other art forms?
It's a very technical art form. I think a lot of people are scared to try it because you're working with carving knives, or, you have an image in your head and then you have to transfer it over to a block. And you don't really know what it's going to turn out like. You can see it in your head, but I think when you transfer drawing it directly onto the block, or even using an image that you found online, it all comes down to your hands and how you're going to move with your tools when you're carving. So I feel like a lot of people maybe fear that process, but I think it's beautiful, and it's actually, I'm a teacher as well, and a lot of people find it very therapeutic, and that's really important for my practice.
You've got to get accustomed to making mistakes, I imagine.
Absolutely. And you have to embrace those mistakes.
Now, Rima, you've started off in fashion design, right?
Yes.
How did that lend to the work that you're doing now?
I guess because sewing was so familiar to me, I was able to make pretty much anything I wanted to. But I didn't really have a vision that I wanted to make except for clothes. But I guess especially pandemic, I didn't have anything to do and start experimenting and just so many things to think about. And this suddenly happened, like I have this vision I like to make. And of course, I'm so familiar with sewing. And therefore, I didn't think of painting or anything. I just took my needles and thread and I started making things.
What was that process like as during the pandemic, a lot of people were sitting at home rethinking the nature of our lives. And here you have this vision and you pick up your needle and thread and you start creating art. What was that process like?
I don't know. I was actually making masks first in the beginning of the pandemic to donate. I was just crazy, like making masks, like 1,000 masks I donated. I just couldn't stop making things. And I was trying to make something that I was making before, like a clothes type of things. But then I started to get more interested in, I don't need to make something to use, or I don't want to anymore because I don't know when we can actually, wear nice clothes and go outside. So I started to getting more ideas from nature, especially like parks and rivers, and I really found that root systems are beautiful, and I wanted to incorporate that. I wanted to make it, and I wanted to mean something, connect to nature. I guess it kind of happened like that.
Now, can you describe for us something you're working on now?
I'm working on a book with an organza fabric, which is transparent. So I make stitches kind of like a more three-dimensional than normal embroidery, but it looks like a root system of blood vessels because I use lots of red. To me, it's like writing a story on the fabric.
That's wonderful. Now, Nuveen, tell me, how important are the materials that you use in your artwork? How important are they?
Well, they're very important. When I'm receiving materials, old Kurdish dresses from the community, and as I'm receiving them, I'm looking at a lot of the dresses at the bottom of them will have like mud stains from, probably, the picnics, and a lot of the portals where the head would go through will have like makeup stains. So there's this sense of like history and loss, but at the same time, like regeneration and like reimagining, even like the rugs that I receive from the community happen to be like machine made rugs. They're not traditional Kurdish rugs. They're all like, manufactured by like a machine and have been designed by a software to make them like 100% symmetrical. So even like looking at that and seeing like, oh, wow, like, Nashville has one of the largest Kurdish communities in the United States. And yet all these like old rugs that I'm receiving happen to be like, manufactured rugs. Why is that? And that kind of and that kind of leads me into like digging even more, thinking about diasporic communities. What does that mean? What is available to us? A lot of diasporic life involves adapting and kind of settling for what is around you and what is accessible and what is affordable. And I think that's one of the reasons why, it's like very easily distinguishable which rugs, are handmade or which ones are machine made, or which fabrics were bought at like, Walmart or Joann's versus the fabrics that were imported from Kurdistan. But even if we dig a little deeper into that, like a lot of the fabrics that are in the shops in Kurdistan and the bazaars aren't even, they're not even made in Kurdistan. So there's definitely the study of like consumerism, capitalism, and displacement in a sense too. So yeah, the materials are really important to me. I find a very special connection between, not only like the dresses. Like I think about like, okay, who made this dress, and looking at the stitches that they made, and then I'm like undoing those stitches and constructing them and stretching them across the you know, kind of stretching and forcing the fabrics and Kurdish dresses out of their original flowy state to make them, quote unquote, behave like traditional paintings. Stapling the fabric to the stretcher bars sometimes feels like a aggressive and violent act, and perhaps that tension of the fabric being stretched from different directions is a form of assimilation and result of diasporic living. So there's a lot of conceptualizing the materials that I use.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. Now, Janira, what do you think about when you're working with the materials?
For me, it's really a process of going into another world in my own studio practice and just disappearing. It's a very safe space for me if I'm having a bad day or if I'm dealing with some emotional past traumas, I love to go into my practice and escape and create something otherworldly, or maybe tap into a spiritual practice that I find just from working with textiles and carving and printing and doing the same motions over and over again. You have one block, but how can you really make it into a different piece each time? Because with block printing, you're printing the same image over and over again. And I've had my blocks for a couple years now, and I can picture each piece I've made in the past with them, and not because it's printmaking. A lot of people think it's the same piece, like additioned pieces. But really, with me, block printing is so versatile. You can make it a unique piece each time. But yeah, for me, it's just escaping into another world and really tapping into something that hasn't been seen before.
And so it becomes a practice and a ritual for you.
Absolutely, yes.
That's beautiful. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekolona. We're talking this hour about the craft of textile arts with Nuveen Barwari, Janira Visepo, and Rima Day. Now, creating art is about taking the world around us, making the artwork that is a reflection of it. Rima, what do you pay attention to that gives you inspiration?
I guess for me, it's human body and nature. And I'm really stuck on this idea that similarity between human body and nature, meaning blood vessels and root systems. And I sometimes feel like that's all emotion must look like. We can't see them, but that's probably how it's formed, like little small vessels to big ones. And sometimes you cannot contain inside of heart, sometimes it spills out. And that's why my thread comes out from my books or globes or whatever I make. So that's I guess, what I'm always thinking about.
I was looking at some of your artwork yesterday and doing research, and it does come out. It's like a three-dimensional touch to your work. And you mentioned it a little bit before, but tell me about how expanding those dimensions really helps us, perceive your work differently.
I guess because it's not finished almost. It looks like it's still going on. It would reach to you. I wasn't really sure why I was doing it, but then I started seeing it's probably my way of trying to reach to somebody or something. I'm not sure the answer, but I think, not so many things are just clear cut. This is it. This is finished. And sometimes it looks like it's finished, but it's still going on, and it's like our lives.
Kind of like our lives, like nature. We're unfinished products, still evolving.
Yeah.
Now, Nuveen, you talked about your art as a form of expression and a form of, really talking about, politically things that have happened and displacement. What have people who've seen your work said to you about the messages they receive from it?
Yeah. Well, I think my work definitely evolved a lot over the years. Um, Now I'm making a lot of more working in abstraction. Um, but in the past, one thing that I think a lot of people, for example, when I told you earlier about how a lot of the rugs that I receive are, industrially manufactured rugs. I think I've had people, kind of writers or curators or whatever, they've labeled them like, oh yeah, like she works with Kurdish traditional rugs, and it's like, wait, no, these are not traditional Kurdish rugs. So there's definitely already these like what's the word, like these notions that people already, or these interpretations or labels that people already kind of put on the work, even if I decide to, which I do have a series of like cupcakes. I used to paint cupcakes for a while just to kind of challenge people's ideas of like, and just me being a Kurdish woman living in America, and at the end of the day, no matter what I make is going to already have that political interpretation. So it's sometimes it's funny to me. I like kind of challenging the viewer and into what it is that they are seeing. But of course, educational. I think a lot of people do learn a lot, and I like to utilize like the titles of pieces, even if like the work is not if the message isn't like visually like in your face, like what I'm trying, like the story that I'm trying to tell.
Yeah.
If it's not like super in your face, at least I utilize like the titles of a lot of pieces, or the statements of the pieces. Sometimes I'll just print out like a news article that may have inspired the piece, and we'll use that as artist statement.
Mm-hmm. You get them to glean in. I love that. Now, Janira, what makes Nashville's textile scene unique to you?
Textile scene in Nashville, that's a tough question, because I feel like it's so at its emerging point at the moment. And culturally, I've been in Nashville 20 years, and I would say I'm very new to the textile community. I think what makes it unique is that you can, and I think in general in the artist community, you can take any medium and turn it into whatever you want. I think there's endless opportunities in the Nashville community to start with something small. Just how I did it, I thought that I wanted to make clothing when I first started, and then I ended up making tapestries. So I think as an example personally for me is that you can just start anywhere from anywhere and then evolve with it.
That's wonderful. I want to thank you so much. That is textile artist Janira Visepo. She was joined by fiber artist Rima Day and art educator and artist Nuveen Barwari. Thank you all so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Khalil.
Thank you.
We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll explore the history of textile art and how it's been building in community for generations. Where have you seen beautiful textile arts? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ikalona, and this is Nashville. If you're like me, you can imagine it. Sewing machines buzzing to make quilts just in time for the fall. Steady hands examining pieces of fabric, then carefully stitching them together. Arranging patterns and colors create something completely new out of scraps. That's what comes to mind when I think of quilt making. The craft can be a solo or communal effort, but it's always done with love. My next guest knows this all too well. Kosher Briley is a quilter and serves as secretary for the Zuri Quilting Guild. Kosher, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure. So tell me about the Zuri Quilting Guild. That sounds like some serious business.
It is quilting and embracing our culture definitely always is for me and as well as my fellow members of our Surrey Quilting Guild. So to give you some history of our quilting guild, it was established in 2019, and it actually came about from the Ray of Hope Community Church here in Nashville. Reverend Judith War Warloth Sauls and Renita Weems, Dr. Renita Weems, said they wanted to get a class together for the women of the church. It was a 6-week program to do some quilting, and it started from there. And here we are years later with a group of phenomenal women who come together monthly and we quilt together and learn so much from each other. Um, Not only with quilting, but as a group of women who are mothers, grandmothers, aunts, just embracing who we are and the art of quilting.
Now, have you been with the guild since its inception?
I have not. I actually joined through a program through the Metro Arts Commission back in 2016. So that'll be 7 years for me. I was a part of a workshop that was set up to introduce African American women in the Bordeaux and Whites Creek area to quilting. The ultimate goal at that time was to introduce myself and the other women to seeing quilting as a form of preserving our traditions, shaping our identity, and expressing our neighborhood values. So 7 years of being a part of the guild for me.
Look, so what? How long does one have to be in the guild to be called a master quilter?
I think it just comes along with your experience that you have already coming into the guild. I myself had been sewing since I was in high school. I was one of those peculiar kids. I would look at clothes and wonder how they got formed, and I would take things apart and try and figure out how to put it back together. So I had some sewing experience when I was introduced into the guild, but I had not quilted before. So I came in as a beginner, but someone who may have already gotten experience in their past or may have quilted with their grandmother or their mother, they could come in as an intermediate or advanced and become ultimately a master quilter of the guild.
So, a few minutes ago, I said how I imagined quilting, but what is the process? How is it done actually?
I'll try and simplify it, but I know it's different depending on the type of quilts that you make because you can do abstract quilts, you can do strip quilts, and then you can do applique, which is actually one of my favorites to see and try and do. But we have some master quilters who are very good at that. But at the beginning, the inception is knowing what your idea is. And what it is that you want to do, whether you actually have a pattern that you want to follow, or if you just want to freehand and just see what comes about. You want to pick out your fabrics and knowing what colors you're specifically wanting your ultimate project to end up being. You're going to pick out your threads. You're going to ensure that you have the right type of materials for your machine, or if you want to do that by hand, you want to make sure you know all of that at first. And then that first step is going to be piecing. And that's usually the first thing that you see at the front of the quilt. And that's usually what takes the longest, right? You're patching together all of your patterns and you're sewing that together. You're cutting at the right angles to ensure that your ultimate end goal is being met. And then you would take your piecing and your batting and your fabric on the back, and you sew and quilt that together, and then you bind it. So just in those easy 3 steps, it's a lot more than that, if depending on how intricate your patchwork will be. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay, I love how you said easy 3 steps. Doesn't sound easy to me at all. Now I'd like to introduce my next guest. Vladimir Betancourt is the coordinator of ESL and public speech at Heart Unifying Communities. Vladimir, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having us.
So explain what Heart Unifying Communities is and who your students are.
Okay, Heart Unifying Communities is a project that we started developing last year with a friend of us who is Elvira. She studies at Vanderbilt University, and my wife, Marcela, who is the artistic part. We decided to create a program that will help Latin artists integrate with the community and with the artists that are from Nashville. There are very few spaces and opportunities for these Latin artists to show their art and connect, network with other people that are in the art field. So that's how we started. We wrote a grant for the fellow partners, and we got the grant. Then we started working with both institutions. Elvira works with Vanderbilt University, and I work with TSU. So we started getting all the resources together, and we created this program with Latino artists, right, Latinx artists, and many of them they had never even tried to sew anything or to stitch or to do any kind of textile art, but they came and they experienced, and we got great results.
What was the inspiration to add textile art to the program?
Well, I will say that textile art was the original inspiration. My wife, Marcela, and Elvira had the chance to do an exhibit in Vanderbilt University. And when they saw the passion that she had for the art and how much she wanted to share that knowledge that comes from her family for many generations, then decided to create this. We decided to create the project, and then the literature and the creative writing came along, and then ESL came too, because we started seeing things that we will need. The initial idea was to create this art exhibit that we had last June. So when we saw the result, what we wanted was to give these Latino artists the possibility to show their art and connect with other local artists. So, but I would say the textile art was the origin of the project on helping artists connect.
Now, as we were in break, you were mentioning to Janira and Rima that your wife is an artist, and you really connected and felt a lot of what they were saying about, how she finds inspiration and goes about that work. I know you see that with the students. What have the students told you about the process in this project that you offer?
Well, if you have about 3 hours to talk about this, but no, it was great. The students, artists, whatever you want to call them. I became one of them. I was there just to move stuff around and carry stuff, and I ended up just weaving as well. And many of them, this was so emotive for them. It was so we felt that the creative writing and the weaving became healing for them. Many of them have very difficult backgrounds in the stories they have, because all of them are immigrants. So it became a healing process, and they felt that the possibility of expressing through words and through art their stories was very beneficial for them.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Lekalona. We're talking this hour about the legacy of textile art and how it builds community. Now, Kosher, I imagine all the stories that the members of the Zuri Guild share when you all get together. Is there anything memorable that you've heard in your time with the Guild?
That's a great question. Our guild, on a yearly basis, prior to COVID, we done quilting, like getaways, or the word obviously it's not coming to mind, but where we would come together in groups, and all we do the whole weekend is quilt. And just imagine if you love quilting and you get together in a big room full of women that you love who share the same interests as you, and you get together and quilt. It's very memorable. So some of the stories I've heard prior to when I joined were just of great times that were shared together, of the women quilting at Montgomery Bell. And that's a state park not far away from here in Nashville. Beautiful location. and just being embraced in that environment, being together and just enjoying making quilts together. So that's one of the stories that I've heard about, just the women coming together and being able to just define or have their time quilting together as one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quilting, it goes back a really long way. And, you know, do you see many young women or men involved in the group or seeking interest?
I've seen people who've asked me about it when they learn that I'm a part of a quilting guild and that I quilt, and they take interest, especially if they've sewn before. Actually, someone here at my job, he lives in California. He was making a t-shirt quilt. So we communicated heavily on how he could do that. I was helping to guide him through it. And he's younger than me. He's got to be in like his late 20s. So it was very exciting to have someone who's interested in it. And so he and I are staying connected and exchanging ideas and things back and forth on how he can improve and continue to work on his quilting. So for me personally, when people find out that I do get an interest and then they want to have some guidance or help, which I always am ready to provide. But like you said, quilting does go back a really long way. So it's good that the arts of quilting is still around and people are interested in keeping it going.
I wonder how a young person can benefit from joining the guild and learning the craft and art of quilting. I mean, I would imagine patience is the first and most important thing they would learn.
Yeah, when I came in, I'm 38 now. So this was 7 years ago. I think I was and may still be the youngest member in our guild. So from my perspective, coming in as a younger woman, it was more than just quilting. Being able to get in a group of women who are of the same culture as me, but we all have very diverse backgrounds, and still be able to learn from them. This is their group of women who are mothers. Whether you have young children, your children are adolescents, preteen, or adults, it still gives you the opportunity to learn from other women while doing something that you love. I love being able to come together with my quilting guild sisters, and someone's talking about their grandchildren, going to college, and we can share in experiences and things that I would look forward to or learn from things that they've learned in their lives. So again, with patience, the patience that you spoke to just as an art, definitely that can go into it, because that patchwork, it definitely requires patience. And depending on how intricate your designs will be, I personally love strip quilts. And that is where I can take what's called a jelly roll, which may consist of a roll of fabric that's about 2 inches. And all the only thing I have to do is just attach those pieces and continue to go and cut as I go, depending on however big my quilt is set out to be. But then I've delved into applique, and with that, it takes a lot more patience, a lot more planning as to how you want that to go. But I never am too hard on myself when it comes to what the end design is, because I think there's a beauty in art not being planned as well, because life isn't planned all the time. You can plan as much as you want.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
And working on a quilt will teach you how to overcome those hurdles and still have your beautiful end product at the end of it. So there's definitely patience and life lessons and learning how to overcome hurdles that I think quilting definitely provides.
Okay, so I got 40 seconds left. Vladimir, have you been impressed with any of the students' work in your program?
Well, definitely. We had an art exhibit that is now running in Casa Azafran, and all their art pieces were just amazing. And she talks about patience, creating these looms with people that have never tried it. It really grew on our participants to learn how to be patient and create the art pieces and again, as she say, planning this is almost impossible. Whatever they had on the first sketch was definitely not what came out of it.
All right. I want to thank you so much. That is Vladimir Bentencourt from Heart Unifying Communities. He was joined by Kosher Briley with the Zuri Quilting Guild. Thanks to you both for being with us today. Okay, so before we go, we're going to learn a little bit more about another textile art form, Oriental rugs, from weaving to washing and preserving them. It's an intricate process. We sent our intern, Doreen Chernecki, out to Ebas Rugs on White Bridge Pike to meet longtime rug seller Ebas Taheriwan.
There's early afternoon natural light beaming in, and the smell of mung bean soup hangs in the air. It feels like I've just walked into the living room of a Middle Eastern household. Except there are hundreds of rugs, some rolled and off to the side, some displayed on the nice hardwood floor.
And then that one, it was made around 1890, 1900. That's the called Persian Sorapi. And this is in excellent condition.
He points to a rug hanging in the back. It's a deep, dark red, with flowers made of more colors than I notice at first glance. Green, brown, orange, and cream.
The color combination, as you see, is magnificent. And the size, most of these rugs are very unusual. This is around 9 by 17 feet, wow, which you don't see that many.
How much would it cost?
This one probably costs about $27,000.
His shop may be full of rugs, but I have to wonder what his home looks like.
I don't have more room to put rugs, honestly. If I did, I would put more. At my house, more than 5. In one room, it's more than 5 even. Per room, it depends really. In the living room, there is 3 rugs. In the dining room is 2 rugs, one on the table, one under the table. And there's a bunch in the closet, there's a bunch in the chest.
Abbas is 76, and he's been here almost his whole life. He came for college and finished his studies at MTSU. His father wanted him to teach English, but Abbas wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and open his own rug store.
Most of Iranians, they grew up with rugs because their homes is full of rugs, and they always get to know it somehow. And some they show more interest, and some they don't, you know. And I was always interested in the art of rug making.
So that's what he pursued.
I started the business from nothing, actually, very little. I started the cleaning and repair, and I knew some about how to repair the rugs, how to clean them. So that's how we started. Then I got more interested in antique rugs, and that's where you see all these rugs come.
There's actually a lot that goes into the making of one of these rugs.
The rugs are made, it goes a lot. I mean, I gotta give you a book to read about it. It's really hard to explain.
I'm not going to read to you from the book, so here's the quick version. First, a farmer shears her sheep for wool, then takes it to market. A buyer might then dye the wool using plants and vegetables, and then sell that wool again to weavers. Then the weaver follows a design pattern. You've probably seen it before. Flowers and geometric shapes woven in vibrant, rich colors like burgundy and brown. A 9x12 rug might take 2 years to make, even with 5 or 6 people working on it just about every day.
Oh, God, yes. If you know how much back and hand and eye and neck needs this, then you appreciate every inch of it.
If it's taken care of properly, these hand-woven rugs can last over 100 years. But the care is pretty complicated, too. At Ebas, they do it all by hand.
Hand done is probably the best method. This is how it's originally done. Now, you'll get a good workout, but at the same time, you'll see a major difference versus machine.
That's Mike Johnson. He manages the store and does a lot of that cleaning himself.
We'll come here and we dust.
First, he flips the rug over and vacuums to loosen the grime and dirt stuck between the fibers. This is called dusting. Then he flips it back over and takes it to what he calls the pool, where the washing happens. At Ebas rugs, they use an olive-based soap. Its low pH helps preserve the natural lanolin of the wool. After this step, the rug looks lighter, more vibrant. With a wet vac, they absorb the dirt and water, and after it dries, they hose it down and scrub it with soap at least 1 more time. Sometimes 4. It's a thorough process. Finally, they hang it up to dry.
We stick it outside. That's a natural process of drying as well.
Okay.
So, you get that sunshine smell.
But this method of washing the rugs by hand is more and more rare. Even the art of weaving the rugs by hand is disappearing.
Today might not take as long because they're not putting as much effort to it. They just want to produce it faster and bring it to the market. The reproduction of them. And they take a lot of design out of it and a lot of colors out of it. So it's less color and less design. So it makes it faster.
Ebbas won't even refer to these mass-produced rugs as rugs. He calls them floor coverings.
Floor covering is a machine made. They go just for color, not the quality, not the age. And it's got to work with what the furniture they have, like very contemporary. And those are the rugs that you buy, and in the next few years it's gonna wear out, and you gotta throw it away and buy another one. But this rug is gonna last for a long, long time. And you gotta always pass it down to the next generation.
We want to thank everyone who tuned in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche, Rose Gilbert, and Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. Shout out to our intern, Doreen Chernecki. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Amanda Smith and Annabeth Dooley. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.